name is Nick Middleton. I live in Middle England, in the mid-latitudes. I'm middle-aged, earning a middling salary, writing travel books and teaching geography at Oxford University. My life is extremely comfortable, or at least it was. Till one mild summer's day when I was thinking about the English obsession with weather. I had an idea for a book. We complain ceaselessly about our temperate climate. But what must it be like to live with real extremes? What was life like in the hottest, coldest, wettest and driest inhabited places on Earth? I put this question to my publisher, and to my horror, she said go and find out. Siberia. Translated, it means sleeping land. 13 million square kilometers of it, almost 80% of the landmass of Russia. I had images of Dr. Zhivago and the Gulag archipelago, featureless Arctic tundra and vast coniferous forests, punctuated only by the remnants of labour camps, a dumping ground for forgotten human souls. But I was to discover that this was only half the picture. In the heart of this gigantic wilderness lies Oymyakon, the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth and my ultimate destination. But I slipped into Siberia 2,500 kilometers to the southwest for a gentle introduction.
Out in the air for less than a minute. Already I can feel my hairs in my nose freezing.
The temperature in Irkutsk was minus 38 degrees Celsius, their cruelest winter in living memory. Apparently the hospitals here had run out of anaesthetic because they'd had to amputate so many frostbitten limbs. But it was still more than 30 degrees warmer than the record Oymyakon claims of minus 71.2. Having booked into my hotel, I decided that I'd better go and acclimatise to the cold, because tomorrow I had a real baptism into life below zero. As my translator, Dima, drove me to my rendezvous in the morning, I was secretly hoping that the current cold snap might just get me off the hook.
I think 42, 34.
32, 34, minus. And are you going swimming?
Me?
Yes.
No. I'm crazy.
You're not crazy. Oh, right, okay.
But even in the minus 30s, the Irkutsk Walrus Club were not downhearted. This Sunday, like every other Sunday, brothers Sergei and Victor were breaking the 50-centimetre thick ice on the river Kitoy, preparing for a dip. I had rather mixed feelings about the whole concept, but according to Natasha, daughter of the Walrus Club secretary, this wasn't just masochism Siberian style.
Why do people come together in these walrus clubs?
Because firstly it's good for health.
It's good for your health?
Yes. The organism becomes resistible to any cold.
Okay. So if you do this regularly, you become healthy?
Yes, of course. And for good spirit.
Also for good spirit?
Yes.
Better than vodka in that case?
Yes.
Natasha's claim that the dip was good for your health reminded me of Captain Bowers. He was the only member of Scott's last Antarctic expedition who doused himself in ice water every morning. He was also the only member, while alive, never to suffer from frostbite.
if you do everything rightly, your body should be warm.
Right.
Gets warming.
Warmer in than out.
If it hadn't been for the women and kids doing it, I'd have wimped out, despite Sergei and Victor's relentless pressure for me to get my kit off.
Faster, faster, faster.
Пальцы замерзнут, а так нельзя. Вот надо, чтобы вот.
I'm a bloody girl, I know.
Все, давай, вперед.
Where's Siberia?
Ничего страшного, ничего страшного.
Maybe it was just the nerves, but at minus 32, the ritual salute to the sun didn't do much to console me.
You ready? Okay.
Опа. Опа, пошел дальше.
I'm a walrus. I'm a walrus. Thanks, guys. I'm a walrus.
It was only after the dip that things started going wrong.
Skin feels like it's someone else's skin. It's not really my skin, though.
I think I must have been in shock, because by the time I got round to recording my diary that evening, I couldn't even stand.
Good for your health? Well, maybe. I can't say it feels good for my health at the moment, because I just feel as if I'm in a state of shock. And I do sort of just about recall coming out, then it sort of went blank completely. Well, I certainly feel as if I've arrived. I mean, it was the perfect way to start. Little hole in the ice to go swimming in. People are, well, okay, it doesn't get down to minus 35 in Britain, but, you know, minus 5 and people wrap up and don't dare to step outside. And yet all these Siberians were out there having a good time. It was great. The shashliks came out and the vodka and just, I really do feel as if I'm here now. And yes, the cold hurts, but there are very positive sides to being minus 35 degrees centigrade. And a Walrus Club is one of them. Have a dip, get around the fire and have a party.
The next day I flew north. The sense of penetrating deeper into the heart of Siberia was palpable. I was 8 hours ahead of London, on the same longitude as Australia. I felt as if I'd entered another dimension. Flying into Yakutsk was like landing on a different planet. On the ground, the buildings showed just how cold it was. The earth here is frozen solid to great depths year-round. Heat from the kitchen of a house built directly onto this permafrost can partially thaw the surface layers, which then subside, leading to whole streets with neither a vertical nor a horizontal line in sight. The modern solution is to maintain the permafrost by building everything on stilts. Apartment buildings and their service pipes stand on tiptoe, as if apologetic for intruding upon this frozen land. Unfortunately, I wasn't so insulated. I needed some kit, and the best place to buy local clothing, according to my guide, Andre, was the central market. Needless to say, it was outdoors.
It's minus 38, Andre. Who are these people? Those coats probably won't be warm enough for me, will they?
Of course, they are for ladies.
And for ladies, yeah.
Oymyakon's coldest recorded temperature is at least 30 degrees colder than Yakutsk was. If I was to survive, Andre insisted that I go native, starting with my head.
It's mink.
This is the mink one. I've heard that mink is best.
One of the best. Sable is better. The same material. Yeah. Is it long enough flaps?
Yeah.
Maybe not long enough.
Wow. That feels very sexy.
Yeah. I think it's better.
Yeah.
Kind of more reliable hat.
With a reliable hat made from raccoon fur, we turn to footwear. Synthetic fabrics don't cut much ice here, and Andre advised reindeer skin boots.
That feels quite good.
With felt-soled boots and huge hat in the bag, the final item was a sheepskin coat, made from about 10 dead sheep if weight was anything to go by. I was ready for the off, and we were planning to leave at 7 the next morning. Siberian roads being what they are, frozen rivers are often the smoothest route, and my journey started with the crossing of the mighty Lena. Frozen here for 7 months of the year and 19 kilometers wide, this river, lost in the center of Siberia, is one of the 10 longest in the world. It was over 700 frozen kilometers from Yakutsk to Oymyakon, and if your engine and therefore your heating failed in those temperatures, that would be it. So it was thought best to have 2 vehicles.
I understand mosquitoes are a serious problem in the summer.
And closer to autumn, there are a lot of midges.
Midges as well.
Midges as well.
So plagues of locusts, mosquito swarms, then the midges, serious sub-zero temperatures during the winter.
Tough place for tough people.
And I've come at the toughest time.
Yeah, toughest time in the middle of winter.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if I survive.
Yeah, we'll check.
Yeah, check regularly, please, Andre.
After a brief overnight stay in a trucking stop, the Verkhoyansk mountains loomed up ahead of us. The approaches to these mountains are riddled with a strange sight for -40 degrees, running water flowing from thermal springs. The trees about the spot where the road crossed one of these springs were covered with bits of material as offerings to the spirits. One of our fixers, Anatoly, insisted that we stop and make an offering to protect us through the mountains.
Теперь нас будет покровительство дух местности, дух воды.
So the spirit of this location and spirit of this water will help us.
Good.
У нас будет все нормально.
Everything will be okay.
Excellent.
Good luck.
Good luck. We've paid our respects.
70 years of communist atheism hadn't stopped a healthy level of pagan superstition surviving in Siberia, perhaps because life is so precarious here. Indeed, the road we were travelling was built on death. Known in polite circles as the Kolyma Road, the Russians have also dubbed it the road built on bones, because it was constructed by inmates of Stalin's gulags, who froze to death and couldn't be buried in the permafrost, so their skeletons were used as ballast for the road. The road stretches 1,400 kilometers inland from the eastern coast, and, worryingly for me, it said that the first people to die when it was being built were always the Western, Baltic peoples. The reason it was built in the first place was because beneath this mantle of snow and ice lies fabulous mineral wealth, wealth that was used to fuel the Soviet economy. When the gulags were disbanded in the 50s, the mines were kept going by the long ruble. Wages here were up to 8 times those back west. But since the collapse of communism in the 80s, most of the mining villages in the area have closed, and their inhabitants moved elsewhere. Nezdaninskoye was an extreme example. In the 80s, it had a kindergarten, a school, a gym, a library, and even an airport. The post office was still being built when the state-owned mining company pulled the plug.
It's a sad epitaph to Moscow's attempts to colonize Siberia. And I guess in this case,
Siberia won. Or perhaps not, because some 30 people simply weren't prepared to leave. They've recently been thrown a lifeline by a Western company, who've stumped up the investment to reopen the mine, and are preparing to start operations again within 2 months. Chris Woods was born in Wales, but has spent most of his life looking after the electrical installations on mines in Australia. He's coming to the end of a 3-month shift, preparing the town for start-up.
Used to be a nice place, I suppose. But...
He's got to bring the whole town back to life by resurrecting the entire electrical and heating infrastructure, which has been frozen solid since the summer. Once it's going, it can't be allowed to stop.
See, if the power stops, the pump stops. If the pump stops, the water stops. If the water stops, the heat stops. So it's depending on the temperature. You've got anywhere between, I think it's about 4 hours, 5 hours.
It's not actually very long, is it?
Even help is still by air. It's still 2.5 hours away.
Yeah.
It can be a bad place.
Yeah,
it can be
serious. I mean, I have this image of miners as being guys who work really hard, tough guys, and yet when they stop working, they play really hard. I mean, how do you play hard in a place like this?
Good question. If you can tell me, you'd take me there.
It had been good to share a beer or two, but next morning it was time to move on. In this climate, though, it's not just a question of switching on the electrical seat warmers. Diesel and hydraulic fluid cease to flow at around -50.
Early morning ritual of fire on the truck routes to Siberia. Just to get the damn thing started every morning, you have to go through this warming up process of the axles and the wheel hubs to give it a kiss of life before you can go into action.
Our trucks had spent the night in heated garages, so at least we hadn't had to light a fire beneath the diesel tanks. Normal practice if you're out in the open. As we left, I asked Andre what Nezdan in Sloy meant. He paused and then said, approximately this word means unexpected. I wondered what more surprises were in store for me tomorrow when I reached Oymyakon, the coldest town on Earth. This was it, the final leg of my journey to the coldest town on Earth. We were entering the plateau dividing the Verkhoyansk mountains, through which we'd just driven, and the Cheskogo range to the east. Some 50 kilometres wide and 200 kilometres long, this huge valley has Oymyakon nestling at its heart. My first stop was at the monument in the centre of town.
So this is it, we made it, all right?
Yeah.
Great. Oymyakon Holoda.
Yeah. It means Oymyakon, pole of cold.
Pole of cold.
Right.
The coldest town on Earth, eh?
Yeah.
Who's this guy, Andre?
His name Obuchev. He
Obuchev.
was a geographist.
A geographer?
Yeah, right,
Jolly good.
geographer.
He was actually on station when the lowest temperature
Right.
was recorded.
Yeah, right.
That map of the world leaves a bit to be desired. North America's all stringy, but Russia or Soviet Union, as it was, much, much larger.
Yeah.
Much more important, eh?
Right, right. Because we are proud.
Of
our
course,
country,
of
so
course.
It should be a lot more prominent. Yeah, sure, it is.
It was fantastic to be standing in the coldest town on Earth, but getting here was only half my mission. Discovering how the inhabitants coped with living in an average winter temperature colder than a domestic deep freeze was what I was interested in now. The family who had offered to put me up during my stay here consisted of Valeria, the matriarch, and her husband Alexei, who lived with their 3 sons, 1 daughter-in-law and 3 grandchildren in a snug wooden house in the centre of town. They invited us in for what was to be the first of many enormous meals comprised almost exclusively of horse meat in one form or another.
It was a great spread at lunch today. A wide range of local delicacies, some of which were very good, others of which I'm glad I tried, but I don't think I'll try them again. The frozen horse's liver were a really nasty, slimy consistency and smelled terrible.
Yeah, in England we tend to cook our liver What had surprised me about the town more than the raw horse liver was that it wasn't an industrial centre like Nezdaninskoye, where people came for the high wages. No, this was a thriving community of all but self-sufficient farmers who were living here because they always had, and they liked it. I couldn't quite believe the way in which life continued almost as normal at these temperatures. At the town school, for example, the children play outside all winter, though it must be said that it does shut down if there are 2 days in a row below -60. The crucial buffer between the townspeople and the cold was this Dickensian hand-fed power station that supplied hot water to every building on the ring main. But Nikolai, the station manager, was under pressure. Since the collapse of the Russian economy, deliveries of the state-provided coal had become unreliable. This year he was 30% short of his annual allowance. He'd been reduced to burning wood. And coal wasn't the only thing not getting through.
The problem is that we do not receive salaries.
And yet you continue working because this, in effect, is like the heart of Oymyakon, pumping and keeping the whole place alive and going.
I found it tough to imagine anyone in the West continuing to work when they hadn't been paid for 9 months. But then again, without heat, this town would cease to function within about 5 hours. Even the most mundane outdoor tasks are well nigh impossible. Next morning, I took out my trusty all-weather mini meteorological station, but it wasn't designed for Siberia.
Basic temperature measurements in these temperatures is a horror story. And bloody wires get brittle when they get cold. Data recorders, temperature, highly temperature sensitive, so... and then the glasses go up, I can't actually see anything. The machine's going. Well, take your pick, I don't know what that's saying.
A few of the things I brought from England are equipped to deal with these sorts of temperatures. I mean, my glasses broke in the first day.
So it's -44.
My pens don't work.
The ink in the pen's frozen up.
So lots of things that I brought just are not equipped to deal with these sorts of temperatures.
Back to old technology. Pencil, that should work. Yes.
But what was amazing was that the people have adapted to this environment. Farmers can't spend all winter tucked up indoors. The stocky Yakut horses survived the temperature thanks to their extra thick coat and compact shape. But once every 2 months they had to be rounded up for de-icing. I joined Kolya, my host's son, because I wanted to see how long I could last outside.
His cheeks are very red. Is that frostbite?
Yes, frostbite.
May I look?
Please.
Gosh, it looks very painful, is it?
Oh,
no. It's about -42 here. How long do you think I will survive until I get frostbite? A weak Englishman.
If it's cold, -50, you may get frostbitten during an hour.
Okay. So -42, not cold, huh?
But until then,
Cold enough for me.
He gave me an hour at -50. I was wondering just how long I was going to last at -42. Collier asked me to get behind the herd and bring them into the corral behind him. His horse obeyed my instructions some of the time, but the herd seemed to be studiously ignoring me and headed off in search of new pastures. It was at this moment that Collier realised we would all be dead by the time I'd got the horses where they needed to go, and I was called in. From my point of view, not a moment too soon.
I lost communication with my toes extremely early on. My fingers are gone, these two particularly, holding the sodding reins. They're exposed a lot. And my nose, I don't know if it's still there. Yeah, I expected this. Altogether, it's hard work, and I've only been out here for about half an hour, I suppose, so Christ knows how these guys spend 8 hours of the day out here. No thanks, not as a job. I'll stick to travel writing.
The de-icing process itself involved using a cone to brush out the snow and ice from the horse's coat. It gave me an opportunity to warm up a bit.
What's that, Andre?
You should do it harder.
Harder.
More.
Without doing this 2 or 3 times a winter, the snow and ice built up into a thick carapace on the horse's back that led to them catching pneumonia. So it was with a certain sense of achievement that I collapsed into bed that night. Not only had I helped ensure the health of my host's herd, but I'd also spent nearly 2 hours outside. Ever since I'd arrived in Oymyakon, I'd been dying to test the defining meteorological quirk that seals its fate as the coldest town on Earth. This valley doesn't adhere to one of the most standard principles of atmospheric physics, that as you go up, the temperature goes down. Since my portable Met station ceased to function below about -35, when I awoke that morning to a balmy -33, it was time to attempt a little hard meteorology.
So, the temperature here at the bottom of the hill is -32.7, 32.6 degrees Celsius. Now, if the theory is right, it should get warmer as I walk up the hill. The only trouble is, I've got to walk up the bloody hill. -28.5. That's about 4 degrees warmer than at the bottom. The theory works.
This temperature inversion is the microclimatological reason this valley is so cold. In the same way that hot air rises, so cold air sinks, and the mountains and hills surrounding this valley trap that cold air like an undisturbed bowl of liquid nitrogen in the bottom of a deep freeze.
It's probably similar in other valleys in Siberia, but I don't really give a damn, because this place has the record. Oymyakon is the coldest town in the world. And I can't quite believe I've made it.
To survive in the coldest town on Earth, you need a protein-rich diet to keep your body going, and this diet was beginning to have an extremely unwelcome physiological effect on me.
Until I got to the stage where I feel like there's an entire horse inside me, and the problem is it's not coming out the other end. And it's not at all an attractive prospect when you're constipated to sit for a lengthy period in a small wooden box outside at -52, which is what it is this morning.
Yet if you didn't eat the meat, your body wouldn't be able to keep itself warm. That night, at dinner with Yegor, the mayor, I asked the question that had been troubling me for some time.
Are there any vegetarians here in Yakutia?
You know that for us, meat is very important. Without meat, we cannot be very healthy here.
No, I understand that.
Утром мясо, днем мясо, вечером мясо и ночью.
3 times meat in the morning, afternoon, in the evening, even during the night.
During the night. Okay.
After dinner, things got even more macho. Despite all the vodka and all that meat, Yegor had challenged me to a bout of Saka stick pulling. And if the warm-up act was anything to go by, I was in no fit state to compete. Now, it was our turn. I was not looking forward to this.
Tear his head off.
Even the warm-up slaps hurt.
Yes, please. So, what do I win?
Hey!
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Very good, very good.
Победила дружба.
Sadly, it wasn't going to be that easy. All I'd won was the right to have my hands on the inside of the stick. Apparently, this constitutes an advantage.
Доктор наук из спорта Великобритания.
I could have beaten him, of course, but international relations dictated I lose. Next morning, there was an unexpected side effect of all that straining. Blessed relief.
I'm getting more and more worried now. Before I came, the highlight of this trip was going to be a rendezvous with some reindeer herders, because I thought, okay, it's going to be very interesting to go to this coldest town, but what would happen if you took away all the modern accoutrements of civilization? See if I can cope. But now, having been here for a few weeks, and the idea of suddenly taking away all the comforts of a built house is actually a bit worrying, to say the least.
My mission was to see what life was like at the meteorological extremes. Before I left England, I'd thought that I wanted to experience extremes without modern technology. Now, I wasn't so sure at all. 160 kilometres west of Oymyakon lies the Tinyatin Valley, home to a family of indigenous Even reindeer herders. They had agreed to let me join them for a few days to see how they coped tending their herds far from marked roads, let alone central heating and electricity.
Nick, how do you do? How do you do? Sura. Nick.
Once my Even-speaking translator, Olga, had introduced me to Petya and Shura, the family got on with that particular Siberian obsession, the procurement of protein.
To catch it.
Yes, I've seen the guys that they're ready and they're not even wearing gloves, are they?
Yeah, they even didn't do it.
They're pretty hard men.
For Olga, an Even anthropologist from Yakutsk University, the beauty of this landscape was nothing new. But for me, it was breathtaking. In a strange Soviet hangover, the family didn't actually own their reindeer. They were paid to look after a state-owned herd. So I felt very honoured that they'd brought in half of the herd and were going to kill one to mark my arrival. The price of the carcass would be deducted from their meagre wages. This was going to be the last meal we had before setting off tomorrow on a 2-day trip to move the other half of the herd to fresh grazing.
Will you have some more meat? Did you get your piece of tongue? Do you need more?
Okay. So, and here is intestines, reindeer intestines. And it's very healthy because it eats only herbs. I mean,
intestines aren't my favourite, I have to say.
It's been a series of ups and downs this trip, and I'm approaching another downer, I think. When I first came to see the reindeer herders, I had the idea of staying out for a night with the herd. They sleep on the sledges, apparently. But Shura was telling me about when her snowmobile broke down, a good 8 hours walk from home. It was her and her son, and they started walking back, but she got very tired and lay down in the snow. And she said if her son hadn't made her get up and keep walking, she thinks there's no question she'd have died. And when I suggested to her that I might try staying out on the sledge at night, her answer was simple: you'll die. So maybe it's not such a good idea after all.
As an honoured guest, the family offered me a place by the fire that night, which I gratefully accepted, since tomorrow, despite my reservations, we were heading off on the herding expedition. The unearthly beauty of the valley provided a perfect example of the high-pressure atmospheric conditions that make Siberia so cold. Not even enough wind to blow the snow from the trees, and crystal clear blue skies. There was even a temperature inversion, like the Oymyakon Valley, giving milky morning fogs. When I emerged from my sleeping bag, I found the family hard at work preparing for the herding trip. Having only one snowmobile, they travelled the 17 kilometres to their second herd on sledges, pulled by teams of semi-domesticated reindeer that live around the homestead. While the men prepared the beasts, Shura and Olga were looking after me.
There are socks, kind of socks, which are made of reindeer skin.
Sure, yeah.
So you have
to the Evans, my boots from Yakutsk were all very well for the city, but for spending whole days outside, it was better to have a double-skinned boot.
She's doing it barehanded, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Weak English man, that's Tori's girls all the time.
After the reindeer skin boots came a reindeer skin coat, half the weight of the sheepskin I'd bought in Yakutsk, but just as warm and better for working in, according to Shura.
It's very stiff.
You are warming, yes, and so this coat will get supple.
Okay,
Yeah.
so as I heat up, it becomes more manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's good.
The coat might get more supple when I heated up, but I was more worried about what happened when I cooled down, especially since I had a 3-hour sledge ride ahead of me, with only Olga to keep me warm. The coat performed wonderfully, but I did feel a little guilty being pulled along by reindeer while wearing one of their cousins.
This is the only way to travel in this landscape.
Yeah, it is ecological and harmful.
I guess the only downside is when these two reindeers in front of you start crapping. It's quite dangerous. Like now. I suppose it's better than frostbite on your cheeks, but only just.
Yeah, black spots on your face.
Black spots instead, yeah.
Once we'd located the herd, it was all hands to the pump to set up the tent as quickly as possible. I was extremely relieved that we weren't going to be spending the night on sledges. This thing even had central heating of sorts. There was certainly no shortage of trees out here, which was just as well, since the branches were used for upholstery and, more importantly, insulation beneath a layer of reindeer skins. And the rest of the tree, more or less, was needed to boil the kettle and to get the intent temperature up above freezing. With Rudolph et al. Attended to, we settled down for tea and reindeer. I have sympathy with vegetarians and animal rights activists in the West who argue against the ill treatment of animals. But out here, there is no substitute for meat as human fuel and animal fur as insulation. As night fell, there was a distinctly dormitory feeling as Petya gave out duties for the next day.
It would be nice to get involved with some reindeer as well, but I'm happy to chop wood and prepare rice, as long as it's not thought of as women's work. Which I have a feeling it might be.
So tomorrow you'll do the duties of the housewife.
Okay, I'm happy to role play as a woman for a day. What's he want now?
Peter tells you, remember your girlfriend in England.
Yeah.
And it will keep you warm.
What very good advice.
The giggling continued after lights out, but eventually I fell into a fitful sleep. And amazingly, the next morning, I was still alive.
Good morning.
Good morning.
During the night it's really cold, yeah?
Yeah.
Did anyone get up and make a fire? I think Kesha did, right?
Yeah, I think so.
He did it twice and Peter once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I didn't do my duty. It was too cold. Oh.
If my journey had taught me anything about life in the freezer, it was that you had to be opportunistic. Before embarking on our mission to herd the reindeer, the nearby river was checked out for fish. A net is spread across the gently flowing river through a gash cut in the ice. Then the beating team scare the fish down into the net by walking slowly towards it, hammering and bashing the ice for all they're worth. It certainly is good exercise, and the Evans swear by it. Though like fishing the world over, you have good days and you have not so good days.
So I think we may be going hungry this lunchtime.
Yeah, only 2 fish,
Yes.
just for you and me.
I think the fishermen might get first priority.
On the mammalian front, snares are laid down, even though they may not be checked for months ahead, since anything trapped is instantly frozen and perfectly preserved.
Jeez, stiff as a board.
Будем кушать.
Yeah, good to eat. Big bunny rabbit. Rabbit stew tonight. Make a change from the reindeer.
И поднимаешь ногу.
Right, okay, leg up.
That afternoon, I was given a quick reindeer riding lesson in preparation for the herding.
Okay.
Okay.
Looks very easy indeed.
Yes, very easy. But let's see.
Yeah, let's see. That's.
I'd found getting onto the horse in Oymyakon relatively hard, and that had had stirrups and a saddle. This was going to be a challenge.
Now, the leg.
Прошу.
Oh my God.
Not there, not there.
No,
You
sorry,
should put it here.
Yeah, well, I would put it there.
With a little help from Collier, but none from Olga, my leg made it to the right place. But the rest of my body didn't want to follow.
Round 1 to the reindeer.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's...
Second time round, many hands made light work.
Goodbye. Yeah, bye. See you later.
Once up, it was fairly easy, though everyone insisted that I should lean forward for best balance, and those antlers are far from blunt. Collier had already insisted that I take off my glasses lest they were smashed by a shake of the reindeer's head. Still, the family were insistent on giving me a taste of their life, and those reindeer had to be moved to new grazing. It was a question of stiff upper lip as I headed off with the herding team, of Petya on a sledge and Igor, his youngest son, on another reindeer. Without my glasses, everything looked fairly blurred, but I could still make out Olga sitting comfortably on the sledge behind Petya, and I confess a little envy entered my soul. It was a long ride out. But then, the spirit of the Wild East got hold of me. With Mikula the dog directed by Petya from the rear, and Igor and I on either flank, we soon got those reindeer rolling. According to Petcher, these semi-domesticated animals need to be moved because, like their wild cousins, they tend to overgraze a particular area. So move them, we did. After nearly 3 hours, we'd done it, and I was done in. It was the end of the journey for the reindeer, and the end of my journey to the coldest inhabited place on Earth.
Do you think I'd make a reindeer herder?
But the best thing you did, it was your falling down.
yeah. Ushugay. I fancy the cold is going to be the hardest of all the extremes. Everything is such an effort. Walking outside is painful. It gets better if I do some hard work because I get fired up inside. But even so, it's an extremely arduous environment to be in and to spend any time in. And it's been up and down, and I do feel as if I'm ending on a high. But I can't imagine hot, wet or dry can be nearly as exhausting as this. I really don't.